we'll get started on this. Thank you for joining us all today. My name is Louis Adamsel, and today I'll be assisting and moderating a panel, a career-driven panel to assist military, whether they're student, young military leaders, or exiting the military. We're trying to give them that key information on how to get young military professionals or any level of military professionals into the emergency management space. This panel is put on by the Emergency Management Growth Initiative, EMGI. Some of you may have found us on LinkedIn or through a career counselor or whatever university that you're a part of. So it's great to have you here. The main vision of EMGI and our goal is to make emergency management more visible and more accessible. And we want to do that by reaching far and wide, internationally or nationally. So thank you all for being participants and thank you for being here. Tammy, did we want to do our survey right away?
If you are ready to do it, yeah, I can go ahead and start it for you.
Yeah, we can do the survey, and then after the survey, we can jump right into the bios.
All right, I am going to go ahead and launch polling. I'll give everybody about a minute or so.
I'm suffering from some test anxiety, Tammy.
Yes.
These are anonymous. We can't see who answers what. No judgment on the questions. We're just looking so that way whenever the panelists answer questions, they know who they're gearing their answers towards. So
I could see what Mark put.
All right, just a couple more people.
Almost to 100%.
Matthew asked if he passed, and since this is a test that you can't fail for, you did pass. You passed one. You can be proud. You passed one.
You did great.
All right, we're going to go ahead and end polling.
Thank you.
Looks like we have a little bit more than half have spent at least 16 years to retirement. The next one is 1 to 5. And then for rank, most of them fell under almost half is enlisted, and the other half is a commissioned officer with a little bit more in between, some non-commissioned officers. And then finally, almost pretty split on active duty or civilian or retired, with a little bit in between for transitioning. So
this is great.
There you go.
So thank you all for doing that quick survey. We appreciate the insight, and it will allow us to help shape this conversation for today. Going into our panel speakers for tonight, our first introduction will go out to Mark K. O'Hanlon. Mark K. O'Hanlon serves in the Federal Coordinating Officer Cadre, Department of Homeland Security, in the Federal Emergency Management Agency Region 3, headquartered in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Since 2015, he supports the Immaculata University as an adjunct professor teaching emergency management and planning curriculum. Mr. O'Hanlon joined the Federal Emergency Management Agency after completing 32 years of military service in the Pennsylvania National Guard, achieving the rank of colonel. Everyone, give that virtual round of applause for our first panelist for tonight.
It's nice to meet everybody. I'm glad to be here.
Our next panelist is Dr. George Schwartz. Dr. Schwartz is an assistant professor and the director of the bachelor's degree in emergency planning and management program at Immaculata University. Prior to his retirement from the Army National Guard in 2017, he served simultaneously as the assistant adjutant general of the Pennsylvania National Guard and as the deputy commandant for the Reserve Affairs at the U.S. War Army College at Carlisle Barracks, Pennsylvania. General Schwartz commissioned in 1984 in the regular Army, served in the U.S. Army Reserve, and we'd like to say thank you again for being a panelist tonight. Everyone give that virtual round of applause. And our last panelist, Dr. Mark W. Corson. Dr. Corson is a professor of geography and faculty in the emergency management and disaster management at the Northwest Missouri State University. He is a brigadier general of the U.S. Army Reserve, and he is retired. He commissioned as an armor officer in 1983 and served 11 years as an active duty tank officer and subsequently as an assistant professor of geography at the United States Military Academy at West Point, New York. He left the active duty to pursue that PhD. So we want to give that virtual round of applause for Dr. Mark Corson today as well. Thank you again for being here. So we're now going to be able to jump right into our panel questions. These panel questions can be geared towards our panelists, and they're, going to be shaped a little bit based on the responses that we got from who's actually in the audience. One of the things that we wanted to make sure that we interacted with is the entry level military professionals who are transitioning, some who are retiring, and some who may be enlisted thinking about next steps after the military. If there are any questions that you may have specifically geared toward any panelist, you can easily just toss those in the question and answer section, and those will either be typed up and answered by the panelists during the chat, or at the end of our time together, we'll try to grab one or two questions from the chat so the panelists can just do a free fall answer. And here we go. So this first question is going to be geared toward the entry-level military professionals who are transitioning into the emergency management space. What are key things that transitioning military professionals can do now to give them a head start into going into emergency management? Some of the things that you might want to consider: education, certifications, relationship building, etc. And we'll start with Mark O'Hanlon first.
Okay, that's a great question. I was actually exactly in this situation 7 years ago when it was my time to hang up my uniform and take a look at what else was there that I wanted to do with my life, because I grew up in an Army family and I served a full career, and that's really all I ever wanted to do. So I was really fortunate at the end of my military career to spend a lot of time working domestic operations, and coincidentally with the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency. So I was able to make some contacts and understand that, the service that I had provided in the military, I could carry forward by service to my community. And it had a really good feeling about being able to help others in their most desperate need after a disaster event took place. So the first thing I did was I found I had access to mentors. I had access to people in the emergency management community who could talk with me about how to translate my military service into the realm of emergency management. And they coached me about going on to the Emergency Management Institute website and taking some independent study courses to understand the language of emergency management, but also to see how similar the military was to the field of emergency management. Emergency management is very military friendly, and you'll find that when you read FEMA manual specifically, except for a couple of word changes here, it's like you're reading the military manuals you've been used to your entire life. The transition for military people into emergency management is not that difficult because there's a lot that makes sense there. The opportunity to take some courses, if you can use your GI Bill, or if you have access to educational opportunities in your local community. It's always good to have some education under your belt, because that looks good on your resume as you're going forward. And it proves to the agency that you're applying to that you are interested more than just having a job, that you want to commit yourself. So find mentors to help you network, definitely do some self-study. And if you can get yourself credentialed somehow, that again demonstrates your desire to be part of this community and this profession, and that carries a lot of weight during the interview process. I'll stop there because like Dr. Corson and Dr. Schwartz, I could probably speak for a long time if I'm not stopped.
Thank you. Dr. Schwartz?
Yeah. So in a previous discussion with Dr. Corson, we both agree that this field is professionalizing. And to follow on what Mark was saying, I think in any profession, there are three kind of components to what you need, and that's experience and training and education. And, my recommendation, of course, being a director of a bachelor's degree program in emergency management, is to find, a really good degree program in that field or related field. And, that's becoming sort of an entry level requirement. And I see a question, I think this is from my former student, Adam, and Adam, welcome, about certifications and all. And I highly recommend starting with independent studies that are offered by FEMA. You can go to the FEMA website, and maybe we can get that, posted up here in a little while. There's hundreds of courses that are available, and those courses build on each other. And I expect sometime this evening we'll talk about, attending the residency courses that are really necessary, ICS 300, ICS 400. And there are a whole list of independent studies that have to be completed before that. So education, start doing some training even before you transition, and then try to gain experience. And I'm a volunteer member of Team Rubicon. Team Rubicon is a veterans-based volunteer disaster response organization. And I would put out, a plug for that organization as well. It's a great place to get together with other veterans, but we also invite what we call kick-ass civilians to join. And it's a great place to get experience at the ground level.
Yeah, thank you. Moving into our second question, and we can go to Mark Corson for this one, but how important is diversity in the field of emergency management, and how do I leverage military experience to showcase diversity?
I would suggest that certainly a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion is important. I'm sorry to say that the importance or emphasis on diversity can actually depend on what area you're in, and also if you're rural versus urban. I'll give you an example that I live in the rural Midwest, not a very diverse area other than the university. And to be perfectly honest, the focus on diversity is perhaps less than you might find in Kansas City or St. Louis or something like that. By the same token, even in rural Missouri, you find communities, all sorts of different communities that are diverse and have requirements. And therefore, I think that the experience of military people who have worked with, you name it, just a wide range of people gives them a leg up over people who are perhaps, how would I phrase it? Maybe less experienced with working with diverse populations. So I really think that's important. A key component of that, having worked with you, all sorts of people within the military, and that's not just, for example, gender or race or whatever, but having worked overseas with all sorts of different cultures, if you can demonstrate that you can show dignity and respect to all persons, no matter what their circumstance, and provide the services required, no matter what the nature of the person or their circumstance is, I think that's absolutely critical, and that's something that service members or former service members bring to the table and can leverage as something that sets them apart.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Do any of the other panelists have anything quick to add to that subject matter?
Yeah, this is Mark. I think, Dr. Corson, Dr. Mark, hit the nail on the head. But I think coming from the military community, diversity is something that we practiced every day. All of our service members, our fellow service members, came from every type of community across the United States, across a broad spectrum of personal experiences. And when you come in, if you have a desire to come to the federal government, it's certainly a skill that the feds are trying to teach everybody on a pretty consistent basis. And when you come from a background where you've lived that on a daily basis, you automatically have a skill that the government is looking for. So, it's something that, play that up in an interview process, because it's important to highlight, because not every emergency manager on an interview panel has served in the military. They don't really understand, what you have lived in your experience. So it's something that's great to emphasize when you're going before an interview panel.
If I could just jump back in for just a quick moment, I wanted to point out that we tend to focus on emergency management from the governmental level, but one of the things that our audience should take a look at is the fact that emergency management spans a wide range from government at all levels, from federal to local to tribal, to business to education. One of the understanding the comprehensive emergency management cycle of planning, preparedness, mitigation, you have the disaster, the response phase, the recovery phase. In that recovery phase, the major way that we recover from disasters in the United States is commercial insurance. And there's a huge component in commercial insurance. We find that many of our graduates that when they go to different places, that the commercial insurance market is actually where they make the most money. And so businesses, educational institutions, they're all looking for people who are actually able to work with diverse populations. And again, you can leverage your military experience to demonstrate a demonstrated commitment and experience with diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think it is very important to highlight those different avenues that you can use your emergency management experience to get into, as well as coupling your military experience to get you a leg up on some of the competition that might be out there. Heading into question 3, Dr. Schwartz, what are some important soft skills that are gained from military experience that translate to the emergency management career field?
Well, I would start with leadership as a soft skill. And I think as someone who's made the transition from an active status to a reserve or a retired status 3 times, I would say that, the leadership experience that we gain in the military is somewhat underrated in the civilian world. And I think it's also misunderstood because, I worked for like 12 years at one point as a reservist and a National Guardsman in human resource development, and then did another active tour of 6 years, after that. And I think, people have this stereotype about military leadership that we're very lockstep and, it's very top down. When some of the best leaders I've ever worked with have been very engaging. And when they make a decision, the decision stands, obviously. But there's that. And I want to echo what Dr. Corson was saying about, and Mark O'Hanlon as well, about working with, a diverse group of people, all types of Americans from all different groups come together in the military, and we work, collaboratively. But also when we go overseas, we're thrust into these situations where, we have to work with and relate with, the host nation, either the civilians or, protecting people in a peacekeeping mission. So I think, being able to, having the good leadership skills and then having that empathy and cultural competence are very important.
Thank you. Our next question goes into a little bit of those soft skills and how we're actually managing that. And it really goes back into communication. So in our field, especially if you're transitioning from the military to the civilian sector, or you're thinking about retirement and going into a new career path, like a lot of you here in the audience, one of the things that you need to understand is how to translate your military experience to the civilian side. Can our panelists share what resources might be available to current student veterans or transitioning veterans trying to get that career assistance and in that translation process from military career to the civilian sector as they look to emergency management as a career choice?
Did you want to ask somebody specifically to address that?
Oh no, this is an open one. I think some y'all might all have like different viewpoints on this one, so it's to the panel.
Mark,
I would
you're a Fed.
say-
Why don't you start? Oh, go ahead, George.
Okay. If you're in the process of transitioning, and you have, I believe it's called TAP. I'm not sure if that's changed, the Transition Assistance Program, or TAPS. Then, they're going to help you to start crafting, particularly your resume into, make it translatable to the civilian world. So, I think that's really important. I think there's a lot of nuance, from a career development standpoint that you can get before you leave the military. But if you're going, to pursue a degree, most colleges also offer career services, and I would invite you to take advantage of those as well, because, those nuances include, not trying to make your resume very appealing to the eye, because a lot of hiring agencies use optical character readers. So, like the more glitz that you put on a resume, the more difficult it is for it to read. And Mark O'Hanlon and I were talking about this previously, but the hiring system for the federal government is Byzantine. And, like where you try to follow all the rules for civilian employment, all those rules are violated, if you're applying for a federal job. So, if your counselor, your career counselor tells you to try to keep your resume, after like a 25, 30-year career in the military to 2 pages, if you're applying for a federal job, that might actually translate into a 12-page resume. So it's the complete opposite. And it's, it could be a whole different seminar within itself to go into. So, try to tap into those 2 resources. And one closing comment, I guess, from me before I turn it over to the next panelist would be to think about joining the International Association of Emergency Managers, IAEM. And, you can work with folks there, prior military, who have, made the transition into the career, and find a mentor. And I saw a lot of comments about applying for the AEM or CEM, and they have people there that can help you do that. And those people will also help, I'm sure, with career transition advice.
I would just add to that very quickly that there's the joint services transcript system, and so that is a mechanism to take your military skills and translate it into associated civilian skills, particularly for, I mean, basic training generally translates into, a few different things, but particularly your whatever your military occupational specialty was, that helps. And then we talked about whether it's an optical character reader or whether it's a hiring manager or whatever, but particularly for the federal government, but I think this is true for any job, being able to parse the job description to determine what keywords and skills they're looking for, and then being able to make sure that your application hits all those keywords so that if it is an automated system or even a person, you're sort of clicking those buttons. And finally, I would just add, it's really important to learn the lingo or the language of your target community so you can translate your experience into their language and not presume that all emergency management uses the same language. Again, the insurance industry vis-a-vis the governmental organizations vis-a-vis education and such, most of the FEMA language is pretty standardized for emergency management, but there are you just want to take a look and see what they're doing and make sure you understand what those potential employers are looking for, so that when you write your cover letter, when you do your resume, you can hit those things.
Yep. Louis, before we go to the next question, something that, again, if you have, someone, a trusted person who's in the career field you're seeking to join, whether it's private sector, public sector, voluntary agency, whatever, you spend an entire career or a certain chunk of your life in the military, and you have these jobs that are significant, but people outside the military don't understand the significance of them. If you say I'm a platoon sergeant, and everybody who's been in the military gets what a platoon sergeant is, they understand the natural responsibilities that go with that position. They understand the span of control over service members. They understand the maturity that it takes to achieve that rank, and all of the schooling that you need to acquire before you can be that job. But in the civilian world, they don't get that. They don't understand. And in the federal world, if the person who's looking at your resume doesn't understand that, platoon sergeant doesn't resonate. So having somebody, that's in the career field you're seeking to go into, who can help you translate your positions into the language of, that career. So, platoon sergeant, and they can translate that into, that sounds like an operations section chief. That's how you could correlate that position into the realm of emergency management. I had, command and control and responsibility over 33 soldiers, 33 employees, so the word soldier gets translated to employee, and, and you basically translate your military language into the language of your next career choice, so that it's understood by people who are going to look at your resume, so that people do understand, the significance of the positions you've held. Like if you were a battle captain in a TOC somewhere, again, you can also translate that into operations section chief or planning section chief, or, if you're a logistician, log section chief, you can carry the positions over into the realm of how people will understand the importance of the role you held, and the significance of the responsibility that you had as well. So part of that is just, having somebody who can look at your current military resume and turn it into what it needs to look like for somebody outside the military to grasp, like all the things that you can bring to the table to support that new organization.
And just very briefly, if we could link the communication piece back to the quote unquote soft skills, which I would note we prefer to call professional skills. George hit on the leadership component of that, and some of the folks mentioned, well, how do we do that if we can't really document that because we were junior enlisted and such? There are some other things that from the military that are highly desirable as well. And let me give you some thoughts on some language here besides leadership. Active followership, the ability to not just be a passive follower, but a real contributor to the team, even if you're a team member, a teammate. The ability to create and work as a member of high performance teams, a member of a staff, for example. Time management skills that come with having to do way too much with way too little time. You know about the ability to work under intense pressure and remain ice cold when you're doing it. One of the things, and I've actually seen this in a couple of different places, but I learned it in the War College, but the ability to work in volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous environments, tailor-made to essentially work in disaster situations, because it's not just a matter that you can tolerate stress, but you thrive on stress. Employers nowadays are just awfully freaking happy if you will show up to work on time, your word is your bond, your character and ethics are above reproach, and you're just not a dirtbag that's gonna bag out on them. And so if you can communicate those things, and then demonstrate that you live that life in the military, those are things that will help you stand out from from some other people.
That is great. It's always nice to have that leg up on the competition, and that's very important to realize all those days out in the rain or those times you spend in formation or working on any mission, guaranteeing that, you know, it got accomplished, that you can easily apply that to the civilian sector. My next question, I'm going to send it to Dr. Schwartz, because it's about the benefit of volunteering to capitalize experience and continue introduction into the emergency management field. Can you talk about that benefit of volunteering for us?
Sure. And, you know, I previously mentioned Team Rubicon, and I'm trying to do some of the Q&As at the same time as we're talking. I don't know if it's come up, like a link has come up in the chat, but, you know, a great organization. And one of the things that I really like about Team Rubicon is that they have, you know, they follow NIMS and ICS, the National Incident Management System and the Incident Command System. So, you know, they sort of set requirements. And I did see earlier in the chat about some of the good IS courses that take 100, 200, 700, and 800. And you know, that those have been kind of waived in TR recently, but you know, they, like a couple of years ago, they were a requirement. And I think, you know, eventually they'll come back as a requirement for deployment. But when you go on a deployment and you're new, you're obviously, you know, they're going to give you a shovel and a skid and you know, some work gloves and a hard hat and tell you to muck out like a basement that's been flooded. And, you know, I think, like Dr. Corson, you know, I started off as a tank platoon leader, and, you know, I was busting track and doing, you know, doing all those things that you do as a part of a, you know, tank crew. So you understand, you know, what goes on at the most basic level. And I don't think you can underrate, you know, that kind of experience if you haven't done it like as a guardsman or as a part of a domestic operation. So TR is a great way to do that. Other organizations that look for volunteers are the Red Cross. And also there are reserve programs. So I don't know, you know, perhaps Mark O'Hanlon could talk about FEMA, whether like at the county and the state level, they accept, you know, help from volunteers or reservists, but FEMA has a reserve program that I think, you know, would, I haven't actually spoken to anyone that has been a part of it, but you know, that it's definitely something worth looking into.
Our students have had a lot of success volunteering, which in a number of cases have turned into jobs with the faith-based organizations, whether or not they're a member of that faith or not. But for example, you might have to help me with this. I can't remember which exact denomination, but Convoy of Hope. They have really great capabilities, really on par with some governments. And rumor has it that if you're on a disaster and you want to get fed, you go to the Baptist men because they will feed you like nobody's business. And so a wide range of opportunities. We had one of our students, a veteran, go down and found himself actually running the operations center for the for a faith-based organization for a week just because he was best at it.
That's amazing. Yeah. Our next question is going to be open to all panelists. And this is going to be, what are some of the red flags for military members going into the emergency management space? What are some of the things that they should avoid, or flat out don't do it? Coming from some people who've been there, we don't want you to make those same mistakes.
Well, I think I might be uniquely qualified to answer some of this. So I think the first thing, while people who join the emergency management profession are great Americans and want to serve, just understand that not everybody served in the military before they joined the emergency management field, and not everybody sees mission first, soldiers always, the same way you experienced it in the military. So while people mean well, there are times when you think like, where's the camaraderie, where's the can do, where's the execute ethos, and you've got to remember that you can't be too hardcore aggressive military when you're dealing with people who communicate in an entirely different way. You will have to learn how to use your soft skills and speak in calm tones. Don't curse as much as you're used to. Generally, I say that kind of facetiously because certainly that's something that's part of human behavior. But you're entering a different realm of people who have not shared the same kind of struggles that you've experienced in your military life. A hardship for you in the military might have been a short notice deployment. You're living out of a shelter half, you're eating MREs and out of a Mermite can, whatever. Sometimes the biggest challenge that your emergency management counterparts have is like they didn't get into the Hilton, they got into like something else, and they're very upset about that. And you've got to say, wait a minute, we're not here for us, we're here for other people. You've got to, every once in a while, you got to ramp down your inner Rambo, and you've got to okay, translate that into those soft skills we talked about before, teamwork, collaboration. You come from a world where, your leadership in the military looked at you and said, I need you to get this done. And I need it by tomorrow. And you say, Roger, out, and you start moving. But in the federal government, if the federal government is what you're interested in, just expect that you're going to have 6 check-ins with 35 people on a Teams call, and you're going to have to lay out exactly what you've done in the last few hours to get them to their objective. And everybody says yay, verily. And then you have a whole bunch of consultants that are going to tell you how you should be doing what you're doing, as opposed to what you need to be doing. So sometimes you have to take a little bit of a humility pill just to say okay, accept the input, disregard the stuff that's clearly not helpful, and then continue to move forward until you have your next check-in, because in the world of the federal government, it's all about trust and verify. And your actions are actually teaching other people, because when they see you in action doing what you've been trained to do, that's where you start making your reputation as someone who's reliable, someone who can be trusted, someone that they want on their team because you get stuff done. So there is a little bit of a feeling like you're being a little bit limited in your ability to just utilize initiative and execute, because there's so many people that need to be tied into what it is that you're actually doing. And in the military, you really didn't have that so much. You were trusted. Your platoon leader, platoon sergeant, company commander, battalion commander, whoever it was, they gave you a task and they just expected you would do it, because if they didn't think you could, they wouldn't have asked you to do it. But the way you communicate your progress towards mission accomplishment is a little bit different. That part, again, I have to admit, I still get used to that when someone calls me and says, what's your status? And my first instinct is to say, well, it's on its way to being complete. I'll tell you when it's done, but what I have to say is, oh, I made these 16 phone calls today, and I went and inspected this site, and I made sure I coordinated with this emergency manager. And oh, by the way, county supervisor is very pleased. And oh, I ran into the mayor yesterday, and this is sort of what I did with him or her. And there's a constant feedback mechanism that we're not used to in the military, and that's something that it takes a while to get used to. But once you do, I mean, it's SOP, you get that figured out. Like, it's not hard to do, but it's definitely not something we're used to doing, if that helps.
I'd like to follow on too. In my experience with the National Guard, in some of these, operations I served with Marco Hanlon, did about a dozen different, state active duty missions for various reasons. And, one of the primary natural disasters in Pennsylvania is flooding. And in 2011, there were 2 hurricanes that came through Pennsylvania in the fall. And we were, I was a brigade commander. I had about 2,000 guardsmen out, assisting. And, it was the mission went on for weeks. And we went into some, if you're not familiar with Pennsylvania, some pretty remote areas in the mountains, in the northern mountains of the state. And these were communities that had been self-sufficient primarily for years, and hadn't had, it hadn't been necessary for guardsmen to come up to assist them. And the situation was so bad, however, that when some of my guardsmen showed up, the local emergency managers were ready to turn everything over to them, all the responsibilities. Like, the guard is here, okay, take over, you're at it. But the thing is, and in 1 or 2 cases, I had, some first line leaders that were, definitely ready to do that. But the doctrine is, and this follows from the military, but also emergency management doctrine, it's a part of the national response framework, that, emergency management is a coordinating responsibility and not a lead responsibility. So, emergency managers kind of work behind the scenes. They can definitely get out in the field and work out there and do some of that coordination and see what's going on. It's just like, what we used to call battlefield circulation, but really, at any specific emergency incident from a level 1, which is national, to a level 5, which is like a car accident, there's an incident commander there who is responsible. An emergency manager is there, to do that coordination. So, my advice from experience, and it's easy for us as military leaders to take charge, because we've been trained to do that all the time. You have to kind of gear that, appropriately for the situation. While you can guide and consult and offer advice, you have to remember that, in many cases, unless you're the incident commander, you're not going to be in charge.
Thank you. At this time, I want to ask the audience, we have about 10 minutes left. I want to make sure we get some questions straight from the audience. I know we've been answering some in the Q&A files. I like to remind everyone to continue to follow EMGI, Emergency Management Growth Initiative, on LinkedIn, and also be aware of the names of the panelists. You can potentially get another connection in this time. But if you have a specific question, please make sure you're adding into the chat. We want to get some of these live questions up on the screen right now. I'll give you all a second. I know you're typing. So Adam just said, is anyone familiar with opportunities in the Arizona area? I'd like to take this question because typically when I'm on LinkedIn, there's different website pages like, aspiring emergency managers organization, and a lot of, or even if you type in the hashtag EM jobs in LinkedIn, that hashtag will, allow you to open up and see so many people posting different jobs in different areas on the Western, Eastern, anywhere. But yeah, those hashtags, EM jobs, even following people in the emergency management profession on LinkedIn, you'll start seeing people post things that have to do with, recovery, volunteer paid opportunities to lead volunteer teams, FEMA, different region specialists. So, or even USA, USA jobs as well, specifically focusing on EM. So thank you, Adam. And then next, we're going to have Tammy jump back in on that question as well.
Hey, everyone. I know I've been quiet sitting back over here. One answer I also want to give to that question is something that took me a really long time to figure out and that I've really pushed forward with my interns. Whenever you go to apply for one of these jobs, emergency management is a really large career option. Figure out what part of emergency management do you want to do? Do you want to do response? Do you want to do recovery? Do you want to do planning? Do you want to do hazard mitigation? Do you want to do hazmat? What do you want to do? Because employers want to see that you've geared a lot of training or volunteering or whatever to that specific area. When I used to jump at it with kind of a shotgun blast approach, I'm just going to put it all out there and see which one picks me up first and follow that panel. That didn't work. When I narrowed it down to the actual field that I liked, I started getting interviews because that's where I was focusing my trainings, my independent studies, anything else that I was doing. I was really focused in that one specific area. It's good to know about all of it, but it's good to really focus in on one area.
So one of the questions in the chat has been from Greg, and as well as Michael Mutlow. How soon should we start applying to different jobs before retiring? And then Michael had an additional piece to that. So how soon should we start applying? And then also, how important are informational interviews? Oh, and you're muted. And so I think I was gonna, let me start with Mark Corson first, and then we're gonna get to Dr. Schwartz as well after that.
So the first piece is if there's a closing date on the application, that might tell you something about if it's open-ended or not. I see somebody said that they started 6 to 8 months out. Most EM jobs don't require a security clearance. Anything that does, you'll want to apply for very early or already have your clearance, because that can be seriously delayed. One of the things we found is that it doesn't really hurt to apply. Well, let me ask my colleagues this. So if you apply and you're not available for months after the closing date, do you think people think you're wasting their time, or are you perhaps creating opportunities?
I was going to address that, Mark. So thanks for the lead in there.
Yeah, dive in.
I was starting to type an answer. It's easier to just answer it verbally, I think. So, I would start by saying, if you've never applied for a job outside the military, maybe even get started a year before your transition date, because, looking for a job is like a series of ratios. You'll send out like 20 resumes, and then maybe you'll get contacted by 5 or 4, different organizations that you applied for. And the first thing they're going to want to do is do an informational interview. And then it's another ratio, for every 10 screening interview. For every 10 screening interviews that you do, you might progress to the next level, like a panel interview, in 2 of those, 10. So, but every step that every time you go through one of those steps, you're gaining experience, and you might recognize where, there's some weaknesses and in the way that you interviewed or some weaknesses in your resume that you want to make tweaks. And I think, you know, if you hit a home run, the worst that's going to happen is they're going to offer you the job. And this is, you know, to Mark's question, before your transition date. And so, you know, you have like really two things to your advantage there. I mean, one is the worst that can happen is that you can turn them down, which is, you know, kind of a good problem to have. But the other is that you have some room to negotiate as well. And, you know, maybe you know, depending on the timing, you could talk them into waiting for you, you know, to make that, you know, the ultimate transition.
There's always also a school of thought that says if you're not an experienced job seeker on the civilian market, that starting early, and you don't want to waste people's time, but if you know you're serious, you're starting early, and basically getting as much practice as you can with interviewing. I want to make reference to also Zoom interviews now. But getting as much opportunity as you can, and also getting any feedback, that's really constructive. One of the things we do at the university besides Career Day is mock interview day, and they recently started doing a speed interviewing process. Of course, this was all on Zoom, but where you could talk to 5 or 10 employers within an hour and get that experience. And these were all volunteer employers who wanted to help people improve their interviewing skills. We actually now have ended up hiring faculty members sight unseen other than Zoom, simply because of the pandemic. So mastering Zoom interviewing skills, the ability to feel comfortable on camera and interact, I think that's a really essential pandemic and post-pandemic skill. And it actually makes it easier to interview more people because you're not paying the bucks to bring them in.
Thank you, everyone, for that feedback. It appears that we've hit the time, so I do want to let everyone in all the participants. I feel like y'all have been a great group of participants, fueling questions, not only to the panelists, but it looks like a lot of people, you know, inside of the chat feature are starting to help each other out. If there's, you know, I still want to make sure that I give you all enough time, you know, to capture any information. You know, if our panelists want to, you know, if you all want to connect with our panelists, I think they also, you know, have the feature on LinkedIn. You know, you can search for their name. You know, myself, I work, you know, in the emergency management side of things, National Guard as well. If you want to connect with us, we'll all be happy, you know, to connect you with any resources or point you in that right direction. So thank you. I'm not too sure if there's any closing comments from our panelists. I want to give y'all a second to have y'all closing comments.
You guys want to go around the panel for a quick closing comment?
Round robin.
Go ahead, Mark.
Okay, so my closing comment would be, while you're going to be out there looking for a job and you're interviewing, remember that every time you interview for a job, you're also interviewing that potential employer to make sure that you want to go work for them. It really is a two-way street. You are valuable. Employers need good employees. They're looking for that, and so you want to make sure it's the right fit. Just really quickly, we know that there's planning and preparation, there's mitigation, there's response, there's recovery. Those are different sides to it. We know that there's a range of emergency management type activities across business, industry, education, the government. If you're familiar with the 15 emergency support functions, there's a wide range of specialty activities that go into this whole business. And so figure out, you know, where is it that you want to be in all of that process, so that ultimately, as you develop your career, you can actually be happy and content, and don't get into something that it wasn't what you thought, it makes you unhappy. Maybe I'm projecting. I don't know. I love my job.
I would like to say, you know, thanks for allowing me to join this group tonight. the EMGI in particular. I want to give a shout out to all my fellow gray shirts. I've been watching, all the folks in the chat talk about their experience with Team Rubicon. I want to thank, all my fellow veterans for your service too. So good luck with your transitions and your move into the field. I continue to serve in a couple different ways, and one is volunteering through Team Rubicon. But I feel like my post-retirement career is developing leaders, and I especially appreciate the students that I have who are veterans who are trying to find ways to continue to serve themselves. So thank you all.
Save the best for last, apparently. I'm okay with that. So first, again, thank you all for your service. I appreciate it very much. I respect everything that you've all done to serve our great country. My particular experience is with the federal government, although I do have some relationships with private sector. But look at your job search as just like another mission, and take a look at your essential applied tasks and really focus in on yourself, because really this is a mission that's going to support you and your future and where you want to be. And just understand that it could take a little while, because the perfect job doesn't always just fall in our lap. Sometimes it does. Oftentimes we find the thing that suits us the best, and then once you're inside the organization, whichever federal agency you're interested in, and if it's FEMA, once your foot's in the door and you become known as somebody who is really a contributor, then other opportunities within the organization become apparent, and you can move within the organization to find yourself into that position that may not have been advertised when you were looking for it. So just understand that sometimes you got to go a little sideways before you start moving back in the primary direction that you were looking for. But don't give up. From speaking from FEMA, we are certainly interested in finding highly quality people who can contribute to the organizational success, bringing in a wide range of perspectives and experiences. So what you have to offer is very important and is very necessary in the federal government. So if I can help anybody in that regard, please feel free to link in with me. I'll do the best I can to help you get you where you want to be, or at least connect you to people that may be more in line with what you're looking for. But good luck. It's achievable. There is life after the military, and it's a good life, and you get to pick your own clothes.
I hate that part.
Thank you, everyone. And with that, we'll see you all soon. Continue following EMGI for more emergency management centered news, as well as some of the other hashtags and pages and different volunteer opportunities that we pointed out. And we'll also be reposting some of those from time to time from our page. So thank you, everyone, and enjoy your night. See you all soon.
Thanks, everybody.